yet. But this team, I dare say, is better than the 2019 team that we saw a couple of years ago. Because our veterans now are like Debo, Brandon, you have Juszczyk, Trent Williams, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner. I mean, the list goes on. And on top of that, the young guys that we had in 2019 have now developed a sense of experience, and they recognize that it's not easy going to the Super Bowl. Following that, we were riddled with injuries in 2020, and then 2021 we make the NFC Championship game, but ultimately lose to the Super Bowl champion LA Rams. They've gone through heartbreak. They've gone through things. And it's important to recognize that sometimes it's not easy to get back to the mountaintop. You have to learn how to lose in order to really win. And to see the development that this franchise has had in such a short time, because if you remember, 6 years ago, in 2016, we had Chip Kelly as a head coach and only won 2 games. At the bottom of the barrel, like we were one of the worst teams in the league. The franchise was going nowhere. People were calling for Jed York's job, and being able to hire a guy like Kyle Shanahan with an NFL pedigree in his family, such as Mike Shanahan, as well as having the experience that he had with Atlanta, and turning this around with a general manager who had no prior experience with John Lynch, and to see what they've done with this franchise, and to turn them into a competitive force in such a short time, because they come in 2017, and again, not looking the best. They make a trade on Halloween in 2017 for Jimmy Garoppolo, who ultimately finishes the year with 5 straight wins, and they finish with 6 wins on the season. Then in 2018, they're poised to make some noise, but because of an ACL tear in the second game against the Kansas City Chiefs, they are unable to capitalize on the momentum they gained at the end of 2017, and they finish with only 4 wins. 4 wins that would garner them the second pick in the NFL draft, that would turn into Nick Bosa out of Ohio State University. And in 2019, we all know that story. They won 13 games. They reached the Super Bowl 54, ultimately would lose to the Kansas City Chiefs. And in 3 years, as an organization with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, they developed themselves into a Super Bowl contender. Of course, following that, a lot of people had them high on their Super Bowl lists, but in 2020, they would be riddled with injuries and again would fall, I believe, to 6 wins. And it was tough. That team was, again, you had guys like Bosa was out, Jimmy was out, George was out for the majority of the year, and it was tough. It was a tough season to go through, and quite frankly, a season that I try to forget at times, especially the year 2020, given everything that happened with the coronavirus and the time that we had to spend in lockdown and in quarantine. But following that, in 2021, they fall to 3-5 in their first 8 games of the season. And many people are writing them off, and they're thinking, yeah, no, this team, what are they doing? They don't know what they're doing. They go to the Super Bowl once, they get injured the next year, and it was a fluke. And they do the unthinkable, and they run off a number of wins. They run the table. They finish with 10 wins, and they reach the NFC Championship. Again, a game that they should not have reached. But towards the end of that season, they had reached a peak where they became a dangerous team that nobody should have wanted to face. The Dallas Cowboys experienced that in the wild card round. The Green Bay Packers experienced that in the divisional round. And ultimately, the LA Rams were able to dispose of those Niners come last year, en route to a Super Bowl victory at the hands of the Cincinnati Bengals. And now in 2022, after having their backup quarterback, Trey Lance, sit behind Jimmy Garoppolo and see what he was able to do with that team, everyone looks to the future and they think, well, Trey Lance is our guy. He's going to lead us to the future. He's going to be the young quarterback that will helm this offense and lead them to multiple Super Bowls and a number of successes. And then he gets injured. And after his injury, Jimmy comes in, and he's kind of shaky at first, obviously, because he wasn't given a playbook during the preseason, because no one anticipated him to be a part of the franchise. They thought, you know what, we'll be able to cut our ties with him. He'll move on and hopefully flourish in another franchise. But that wasn't the case, because Jimmy would actually perform pretty well, actually. I mean, it was probably one of his best runs as a 49er. And after a crushing defeat where they allowed the Kansas City Chiefs to score 44 points, at the trade deadline, they are able to garner the talents of Christian McCaffrey. And since then, they've gone on the 7-game winning streak that I've mentioned, but ultimately Jimmy Garoppolo suffers another injury, and he's out for the year. So now we're down to Brock Purdy, and we're fresh on a 7-game winning streak. For a team that had Super Bowl aspirations and hopes and dreams at the beginning of the season, how many of you would have guessed that the quarterback would not be Trey Lance, that it would not be Jimmy Garoppolo, but instead it would be some guy named Brock Purdy out of Iowa State University, the last pick in the draft, dubbed Mr. Irrelevant, from Gilbert, Arizona, by the way, which is the home of the Super Bowl this year, because quite frankly, I was not one of those people. I truly thought Trey Lance would lead this team to success this year, perhaps gain a wild card berth in the playoffs, because I was high on the Rams. I thought these guys would play good enough to go back-to-back for the division title. And then when Trey gets hurt, I'm thinking, okay, fine. We got Jimmy Garoppolo, a proven veteran, has made the Super Bowl, has made 2 NFC championship games. And then he goes out. And this is the part of the story where I recognize, yeah, you know what, I am kind of nervous, because I don't know what Brock Purdy's all about. Aside from seeing him play in the preseason, I'm thinking, man, like, there goes our chances. It's not meant to be. And yet this guy comes out and balls out, torching the Miami Dolphins, torching the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, heading into Seattle, weathering the storm, weathering the 12th man, and comes out with 3 victories, helping keep this streak alive.